Hi friends, welcome to this latest episode of the Nationalist View, and we have with us a very special guest, Colonel Miri Eisin. Colonel Eisin, thank you so much for being here.
So important, and I'm so glad that you invited me.
So in this episode, we are going to speak with Colonel Miri Eisin, who is a former Israeli intelligence officer. She's also a former international press secretary to Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert and a senior fellow at the International Institute of Counterterrorism, Reichman University. And she has a very deep background, which spans intelligence, security, diplomacy, and she is a frequent global media commentator also. So, Colonel Eisin is going to offer us a clear-eyed Israeli perspective on a rapidly shifting global security landscape, and especially set against the shock of the Bondi Beach terror attack, which targeted a Hanukkah gathering on December 14th, killing 16 innocent people. And this conversation is thus going to we are going to examine the rising global anti-Semitism, the spillover of Middle Eastern conflicts into the Western societies, evolving threats from Syria and IS, and Turkey and Hamas relationship. So, Colonel Aisin, my first question is, recently this shocking incident happened, the Bondi Beach attack in Sydney, Australia, which has shaken not only the Jewish communities, but all the liberal democracies across the world. So, from Israel's perspective, how do you interpret such incidents in context of rising global anti-Semitism and jihad-inspired radicalization?
When we talk about the jihadi-inspired terrorism, when we talk about the rhetoric, or when we always talk about words, but this is exactly the example of words that turn into action, that turn into violent action, that turn into terrorism. And that is the steady aspect that Israel has seen worldwide, the Jews have seen worldwide, and it's at the basis of terrorism extremism. Somebody is not recruited into a terror organization by saying, come kill Jews. They're recruited in by belonging to some kind of a get together. It's about values, and I say the word values, of pulling people in. And once they're inside these different organizations, that's when the education to extremism, and especially to dehumanizing the other side, the ground zero of hate speech in the world is anti-Semitism. It's the oldest hate speech, and it's the one that has brought, for the last 2,000 years, 1,500 years, 1,000 years, you can give the different examples how the speech, the rhetoric, turns into action, turns into extermination. And that's what we saw now at Bondi Beach. I'm very worried about the implications for this, not just in Australia where the writing was on the wall, but in places like Canada, in places like Europe. In Europe, it's always been there, and because of that, they give more protection to Jewish sites. So it's a very, very sad commentary on what rhetoric, words, bring about to extremism, that bring about terror actions. And that's exactly what happened at Bondi Beach.
So, is it a spillover of the Middle Eastern conflict?
By asking that question, it's as if, and that's that aspect that to me is a problem, is not your asking the question. It's that premise of the question that it's okay to be against what Israel is doing against Hamas in the Gaza Strip, that's okay. And it's okay then to attack any Jewish symbol worldwide and to kill Jews worldwide because of what is perceived as the negative Israeli actions in the Gaza Strip. Just think of what that means. And so that's most definitely the spillover of what has happened over the last 2.5 years, which is anti-Semitism is the exact same as anti-Israel or anti-Zionism. And I would love to have a real conversation with those who are anti-Zionist or anti-Israel. I would have a conversation with them. But what we're seeing worldwide, as I said, anti-Semitism is the ground zero, meaning everything is about the Jews. Israel is Jewish. If you just erase Israel, if you just erase the Jews, Everything is fixed in the world. I'm being very sarcastic. That is the basis of anti-Semitism. I want people to think about what that means. That's been around for 2,000 years. There are those who are going to go, right, and we just haven't erased the Jews, and that's why everything in the world is bad. I want people to look in the mirror. That spillover is exactly basic anti-Semitism happening worldwide. The worst part, Arun, I think that most people don't realize is that anti-Semitism, the ground zero of hate speech, it's against the Jews. Erase the Jews. It's going to be against other minorities, other groups. That's exactly what hate speech is, both against the Jews, anti-Semitism, and against any other ethnic group.
So let's come to Syria, and so now it has been 1 year into Syria's new regime under Ahmad al-Shara. So how does Israel assess the security reality on its the northern border side, and has the threat reduced, or has it simply changed the form?
There's no question that the threat of the new Syria is reduced right now compared to what it was before under the Assad regime. Under the Assad regime, the Islamic regime of Iran and Hezbollah, as a counter and additional force, both had bases, capabilities in Syria against Israel. And when I say in Syria against Israel, it's against Israel as the symbol for the Islamic regime of Iran of Western decadence, and certainly also Hezbollah. And both the Islamic regime of Iran and Hezbollah and the Assad regime called for the erasure of Israel as a state. The new regime does not do that. And if I say again, words matter, in words, this new regime under Ahmed Shara, its words are very different. They call Israel Israel. They don't call us the Zionist entity. They absolutely view Israeli actions that are what we would call preemptive, protective security actions against what Ahmed Shara's people stood for until they took over. So on the one hand, it's absolutely not the same, and that's less threats. But the second aspect is not just who is Ahmed Shara, that his nom de guerre, the name that he used, that he chose when he joined Al-Qaeda, established Al-Qaeda in Syria, established a series of Al-Qaeda affiliated organizations in Syria. Al-Qaeda is not good news, not for Israel, not for the world. And the question is, in Syria, that he is now the president of, his minister of defense was his second-hand man in Al-Qaeda, looking very Osama bin Laden-ish, meaning they look very similar. They have changed. But what about all of the people below that? And we have seen in Syria, I'm going to use the Jewish word of pogrom, and I'm going to say ethnic cleansing of the Alawites. And again, it's not about the Alawites being the good guys. That's Assad's ethnic group. But when you take over and you've expelled the bad dictator and you are arresting the bad dictator's horrible men, you don't go ethnic cleansing into the women, children, as was done. Second ethnic minority that's being attacked are the Druze. Again, they were part of the former regime. They absolutely supported the Assad regime. But this new regime is going out against them. For Israel, it's a security concern that those same people that are going against the Druze in Syria, against the Alawites in Syria, are going to continue to view Israel as what we were talking about before in the anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist terms, that the existence of Israel is the problem of the world and they want to destroy us. So Israel has been taking clear-cut steps to prevent their being able to attack us. This isn't about changing the regime. This is making sure that they don't have capabilities to be able to come against Israel.
So do you see first this Bondi Beach attack, in which we have seen that the perpetrators of this attack, so they were closely linked to the ISIS. So these are the initial reports which have come in. And we have also reports that ISI is probably regrouping, and there is a rise of ISIS. Correct me if I am wrong, ISIS operatives or functionaries in the Shara regime also. And then we have seen, Hezbollah also, regrouping, and Israel, taking preventive action also in Lebanon. So how do you see this, overall in the Middle Eastern context, that how these forces and also in the larger global security matrix context, that do you see a pattern of regrouping of the Islamist forces?
First of all, the fact that they're regrouping is because they want to regroup, but that's because, Arun, they were heavily hit. The Islamic State was heavily hit a decade ago. Hezbollah was heavily hit by Israel last year and continues to be heavily hit. When we're talking Al Qaeda, it's something that the international community tries to act against. So I'm taking that one apart and I'm saying the good news is they were heavily hit. The bad news is that they're trying to regroup. So when they're trying to regroup, what we want to do is we want to preempt and prevent. I'd like people not to join it. That would be my best case solution. So here, if the new Syrian regime under Ahmed Ashara is a viable alternative that is not the Islamic State, that is not the extremities of Hezbollah that's Shiite, or Al Qaeda that's Sunni, or the Islamic State that's Sunni, because there's different aspects here within that Muslim world, maybe it will be something that young men will join and feel proud of. And it won't be about destroying the rest of the world. It will be about rebuilding a Syria that they can be proud of. It doesn't have to be the way I would build Syria or India would build Syria. It has to be the Syrian way that they would build it. But maybe it won't be about destroying the rest of the world. That's a good alternative. So when I say that they're regrouping, my challenge is, where do they get their arms? Why are young men still coming into them? Why does it still inspire these young people to join them? And who is supporting them? And here I'm looking at outside actors who bring in weapons, who bring in ideology, who export that ideology. These are actors, the stakeholders, both in the Middle East and around it, who we need to be wary of.
So now coming to Turkey, and as you have mentioned that there are no outside actors. So Turkey, there are growing allegations of Turkey facilitating Hamas financially and logistically, and of course it is also now said to be a hub of Muslim Brotherhood, which is the fountainhead of one of the fountainheads of Islamic terrorism. So how concerned is Israel about Ankara's role, and what are the implications for NATO and regional geopolitics?
Israel and India have a very strong, important relationship, both a diplomatic one and a security one, looking at different threats and also looking at shared ideas and shared geopolitics. Turkey still has, on paper, diplomatic ties with Israel. And I say, how can you have diplomatic ties with Israel when Erdogan, the president of Turkey, used to be prime minister, became president, president for life, when Erdogan, as the president of Turkey, openly calls for anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic cries. Now, on the one hand, he says two-state resolution, that would be Israel and Palestine, and India recognizes Palestine as well. And on the other hand, he calls us the worst country on earth and repeats all of those horrific anti-Semitic memes that I spoke about at the beginning of our conversation. So here we are, okay? Turkey is a destabilizer under Erdogan. I'm going to ask a question. Are all Turks the same as Erdogan? Erdogan's political party is a Turkish version of Muslim Brotherhood. Erdogan, for 20 years, not just for the last 2 years, has been a strong supporter of Hamas in the Palestinian arena. Hamas is a Palestinian version of Muslim Brotherhood. Hamas has always had both a location and a back. There are Hamas operatives, main ones, who are in Turkey right now. And I go back to what I said, and yet they seem to have as if diplomatic ties with Israel. But Turkey is even more complicated. There are United States bases there. Turkey is a full member of NATO. So when we talk about Turkey, Turkey also, and I encourage people to go look at a map. Turkey has a very long border with Syria. And in this case, I would even, and I say this to people get an idea, just like India shares a very long border with Pakistan and a very long border with Bangladesh, Turkey shares a very long border with Syria, meaning everything that happens in Syria immediately impacts in Turkey. Turkey is hosting over 3 million Syrians refugees who left Syria because of the civil war. So when we talk about Turkey in this arena, they are a very important stakeholder. They have a lot of their own interests because they share a border and they host a lot of refugees. They are also very much in the ideology of Muslim Brotherhood. So, are they a future threat? I am going to say that they are a potential threat, but all of these issues existed before Erdogan, even with Erdogan. Arun, I'll share, you mentioned before that I was the Prime Minister's international media advisor under Prime Minister Olmert. Miri, was with Prime Minister Olmert in Ankara, hosted by President, at the time still Prime Minister Erdogan, in 2006 at the then Prime Minister Palace. And so you can have diplomatic ties when you're still Muslim Brotherhood, when you still share that border. It isn't automatic that it has to be this very horrific rhetoric and actions. So that I still hope that it can change, but I absolutely see the threat that's still there.
Thank you, Colonel Eisen, for taking time out from your busy schedule. And it's always a pleasure and a privilege and an honor to have you on our show. And the way you share your perspective and deep insights. And thank you once again for being here. And we hope to host you back soon again. Thank you.
Thank you so much.